Yes, yes, yes. Welcome once again. This is another edition of the Mastodon Cast, and this is your host, Marcel Mastodon Cruz. Still alive. or something like that. well, we had a kind of a small hiatus over there, and I want to address that first. And that is because this is a new podcast, and we tried out in two languages. We were trying out episodes in Spanish as well as we were trying out episodes in English. Now, to my surprise, I was thinking when I was analyzing the statistics of the first episodes, I was thinking, okay, so since most people are used to hear me in Spanish, it's gonna go lean over a little bit into the Spanish side. But to my surprise, and that is the reason why you're hearing this in English, it was quite a tie in which the English episodes they came quite close at the top, which was really surprising. But then we're still making episodes of the El Mastodon podcast, so it should not come as a surprise. So people has kind of picked one in English and one in Spanish. So this is where we are now. We're coming back now on the month of March. Now, the thing is that the month of February was pure fire because one funny thing about February is because it's Black Appreciation Month, or appreciation to African American history. And since all of the incidents and social turmoil, specifically in the United States, now we're seeing that it's the month to call out who we think is a racist person. And the unfortunate turn on the month of February was to Joe Rogan, who is quite a polarizing figure himself because a lot of people, they see him as this pioneer in podcasts, even though he's not on the pool of the first podcasters. But it is someone who I have to admit who has taken the whole podcast thing into another level, into another visual level as well. So even though he's not on the bunch of the originals, and I spoke about this on this very same podcast, because there's Adam Curry, Mark Maron, those are guys are the originals. There's a couple of other more, but those are like the main originals. Then a little bit later on is when Joe Rogan came along, and first it was because he started doing some interviews on some people who had kind of a different opinion on how this whole pandemic thing is being handled. Now, go into that first because I want to go through steps, right? Go into that specific, that was the incident in which Neil Young decided to pull out of all of his music because Joe Rogan was spreading misinformation. And I will get back to Neil in a second, but I want to address the first issue first. The first issue here. Now, a lot of times, and specifically since Donald Trump won the presidency, the term misinformation has been thrown a lot. And something that worries me about this whole misinformation thing is the fact that we're turning enterprises and companies' opinions and their research, which, as we all know, is majorly to favor them, as an absolute truth. And that is something that is a little bit dangerous on its own. Because I'm going to start out with the first example. I'm not the biggest fan of Israel as a government, and I want to make that like really clear. I don't like what they have been doing to Palestine and all of that stuff. I'm not in favor of that. Now, when it comes to the topic of science, I tend to be really careful, and I tend to listen a lot to what the people in Israel they have to say, because it may not be the coolest government in the world. They may be doing their own brand of oppression and everything, and I acknowledge that. But when it comes to scientific research, in the case of Israel, you have to give them not some credit, but a lot of credit, because when they delve themselves inside of research, it doesn't matter the topic, if it is cannabis or if it is same main controversial topic, because I don't want to even mention it, because now we are on this whole pool of regulation. Now, one of the points that Joe Rogan issued in his apology when the whole Neil Young, then I'm going to go to India RE, it was the fact that there were some conflicting tests and some conflicting studies that are coming from all other parts of the world that had to do with this specific topic. This is really a busy episode to do, to be completely honest, because it is on the vaccines. So if I get flagged, then I get flagged. What can I do? But the thing is that we cannot rely on the United States to be the sole source of all of the information we're getting. Because there are other parts of the world that they're saying that most of the vaccines are not effective. And we have to remember something about this vaccine. This is a vaccine that was developed under a year after the pandemic broke out. Most vaccines and most pandemics, recent times, and when I say recent times, I'm counting like 200 years or so, they have been developed within the time span of 4 to 5 years. So there's a lot of room for error, even though we have become really way ahead on what it is technology and a lot of the topics that we're talking about, right? So, and another fact that it is out there is the genome theory, in which each one of us is different. So our immune systems are different from one another. People have stronger immune defense systems, and there's people who have weaker defense systems. And this is something that is relatively new. We're talking about a virus that it will turn into 3 years at the end of this year. We already have vaccines, we have boosters, we have a lot of stuff out there. So even though we want to advise people on doing the right thing and doing what is recommended by health authorities, it worries me the fact that health authorities want to make a complete claim on an absolute truth. And in a way, even though I'm not the hugest of Joe Rogan's fans, I was even blasted for the fact that I said that there were like only 10 episodes that were good. And it's not like that. There's a couple of episodes within that podcast that to me, they stand out a lot. And I know there's over 1,700 episodes or something like that. But the thing is that in my case, it's not like the first podcast that I go to consume, you know? And even though that's a fact over there, that doesn't mean that I do not respect or that I do not acknowledge the work that Joe has done. Now, we're on the Neil Young, the misinformation. So, Joe decided to bring in a doctor who was banned out of Twitter because he was accused of giving misinformation. But once again, this is a doctor who has credits, who have been working with the vaccine, who has been working with everything that has to do with this. So it's kind of contradictory, you know, and there's a lot of tests and research that is coming on all around the world that is stating that the vaccine may not be as effective as people think. And I'm not saying here, and I'm not rooting for people, hey, don't get vaccinated, it's bad. It's not what I'm saying here. At least in my case, I'm vaccinated. I have the 2 doses, and I also have the booster shot. In my case, is Pfizer. But the reason in my particular case is because in my case, I live with my mother and I live with my stepfather. And they have a lot of conditions in which I cannot risk it. Some polarizing opinions if I'm going to get vaccinated or not. In my case, it's not much of a choice. So far, the booster shot was kind of tricky over there. I felt a little bit, like down and a lot of body pain and all of that. But it wasn't that bad, The thing is that it's not like I'm telling people not to get vaccinated, but it's not like I'm also not listening to news and research and respectable research done on the fact that maybe vaccines, they do not work as well as maybe the pharmaceuticals want people to think they work. So there's a reason for error, but it scares me a lot, the fact that if I dare to bring someone who will say, in fact, okay, these chemicals would not work on everybody, so this is the reason why the vaccine will fail. So I don't want to be slated on the fact that I have to say what Dr. Fauci and what these big pharma companies, they think it is the absolute truth, because this is something really dangerous. When we see traditional media such as television, radio, we know immediately that we are fed a combination of what sponsors want us to think and some facts thrown in the middle of everything. And that's the truth of media, even if it is not, because everybody likes to point Fox News, for example, but CNN, they're not saints on this one. They have justified health insurance companies throughout the years. They have justified practices that are detrimental to society themselves, and this same kind of people, they want to be the ones who hold the absolute truth on health issues. Now, let's go to the genome theory for a second there. We are different. Even though we have the same body, the same structures that made our skin, even if there's different colors on it, we are different on how our immune systems works. It's not just on how we think or this language or where we come from, but as humans, we're coded to be different. So this is a vaccine, once again, that was developed under a year. And it has a lot of room for errors. So it's not bad. I do not consider bad the fact that Joe decided to use his huge ass platform to bring a different opinion, because you watch CNN, you see all these crazy people saying that it's safe, that is the way, and like the Mandalorian, right? And then you go to CNN, you have to get vaccinated. If you don't get vaccinated, you are being a threat to your own society. And that's the kind of language that has led to so much polarizing on this whole issue to start with. Because you're forcing people. And it's obvious it's a health issue. There's a mandatory law aspect on it. And I can understand that part. But when you get media like CNN, for example, telling you that if you don't get vaccinated, you are doing a huge harm to your community, now there's something a little bit dangerous here. Because something that worries me about this topic specifically is the fact that Big Pharma gets its way into Congress and starts saying that this is the way things work. It is the way that we say. And if someone says something different, even though they are on internet platforms, we're going to get through the FCC, we're going to get through everywhere, and we are going to outlaw this. Because we want the people to think the vaccine works. And once again, I gave them a good excuse over there. They have developed a vaccine on less than a year into a global catastrophe. It's something that is not easy. And it is something normal, using human logic, that there's room for error in that small time span. Now, the thing about this is that Neil Young decided to pull out his entire catalog. And I breathe heavily because this is the part in which this podcast will become controversial. I do have my respect for Neil Young as a musician. And I did used to have a respect for Neil Young as an activist on the 70s and his whole beef with Leonard Skinners and racists. And he was really fundamental of making people understand equality in a lot of things. And I recognize that to him. But at this time, first of all, I did not know that he was still alive. And second of all, the reason of pulling your music, because there's misinformation on this platform, is one of the dumbest things that you can do. Oh, but he can do it. Because even though I'm doing this podcast, as many of you, maybe if you didn't know, I'm also a musician and I'm also a performer. And I wish I had a good reason in which I could pull out a Spotify, but I can't because I don't have so much money in the bank or licensing as Neil Young has or Indie has to pull out my music. Now, Neil Young and even Jon Stewart, who is a personal idol of mine, has come out to say that he is taking things out of proportion. And Joe Rogan did an apology. I don't know which thing was worse. Either if it was Neil Young pulling out his music out of Spotify, or Joe Rogan doing the apology video. Because when these things happens, you have to be really careful when you're gonna do an apology or you're gonna be recognizing something. You have to be really careful because people are ready to shred you to pieces. So what I tend to recommend in these kinds of cases is try to wait a week. Not he has been responding like 24 or 48 hours after each call out has been made. So that's something that try when you have this situation happen to you, try to give it a week so the animosity lowers a little bit and your message can go through a little bit more smoothly. But his apology video, people said that he did not apologize. They said a lot of things, and they kept shredding him. And I think it was unfair, and I think Neil's actions were really unfounded here. Because before I get to India Ari, the thing about podcasts is that if you in this moment you think that Joe Rogan's podcast is the worst thing in the world and is the podcast that is filled with the most misinformation in the world, you don't know shit about podcasts. That's for sure. Because I can cite like 20 to 30 worst podcasts. They are far right wings. They're KKK podcasts. There's everything. Because this is the internet. This is not television. This is not radio. In which if the people say that they don't want you anymore, they can take you away from it. And I think platforms should be a little bit more responsible about this. I don't think Spotify's answer to that was the best one, because when you're throwing money at something, you're sounding quite guilty, and then the effort that your main star, to which you paid $100 million, falls into the ground. Because in that first apology video, Joe said it pretty much clearly that he wants to bring different opinions abroad. Something that CNN is not willing to do, and the people that Fox News brings there too crazy to be believable or have any credit whatsoever. So do we have two extremes of the spectrum, and we have this one guy who tries to balance all of this, and then he gets slammed for that. So I think it's really unfair, and people need to understand that you consume in the internet what you want. And sometimes the things that you do not want, it's not that easy. Because, okay, let's say, for example, that people would have tried, that they would have gone Joe Rogan out of the air. Okay, you did it. Now what? You got 30 to 50 podcasts that are worse than that, and they're roaming around. And I don't want to blast Joe on that, because Joe has done some pretty really good episodes on what it is, the music industry, and a lot of stuff. But the thing is that the internet, you need to know that you consume what you want, and what you don't want, you don't consume it. But the thing is that it is funny, because this is the thing that happened with Howard Stern in the 80s. 60 to 70% of the people who tuned in to hear Howard Stern, they were mostly haters, waiting to see what he was going to say next so that they could blast him. And this is a time in which the internet did not exist. So this is what I tell people: be careful of what you wish for, because you could get something worse. The internet is not radio, it's not television, it's does not work in the same way. So you have to have that on mind. Now, moving on to that one, then came India Ari, and she said, I'm not taking my music off of Spotify because of Neil Young's reason, but for this. And she started showing a lot of clips of Joe Rogan with hair, saying the N-word, like 100, I don't know how many times. And then it was the Planet of the Apes reference. Let's go back to that one. Joe Rogan had hair in all of the clips that India Ari showed. And India Ari does not know jack shit about podcasts. Because even though the Planet of the Apes thing, I'm gonna admit that one shook me a little. But at the end of the day, Joe Rogan himself has a disclaimer on his podcast in which he states really clearly, I'm a tool. I do not know nothing. I just open a microphone and start talking shit. So he's given the disclaimer that he's not a fucking expert. And podcasts are done on trial and error. My first episode of a podcast, it was crushing and blasting a congresswoman here from Puerto Rico. She was a conservative. And I was blasting her. It never even got into context. It was like swearing, insulting for like half an hour. That was how long this used to be. And that was my first episode. So at the beginning I felt shocked, and I felt quite appalled by it when India Ari showed it, but then I started remembering how I started. And most of my first episodes, they were like swearing and insults for minutes and minutes and minutes, and even almost an hour. And that's how I started on the podcasting. And at the same time, I was on radio, not saying an even one foul word. And that's the thing. We have to be really careful on how we are consuming. The internet is best. It's going to give you information to fill out on two sides on any polarizing issue. And we have to be careful. We have to teach our children to consume it and use it in a responsible manner. And we have to be there. It's not like we can expect teachers and other people to do that for us. We have to be proactive, and we have to be there. The thing about this is that going into that, I felt offended at the beginning, but then I started realizing that it's trial and error. That's how you do a podcast. Even the real pioneer, the real OG on this thing, which is on the popularized things, because there have been a lot of people and there's going to be argument, but I say it is Adam Curry because he was the first person with kind of a sort of a celebrity status as an MTV VJ who started the whole podcasting. He did some pretty shitty things himself at the beginning. And it was not like shady racism, insult things. It was like the first podcast that existed. It was like a diary. It was like a verbal diary. Okay, I woke up today. I brushed my teeth. I went with my buddies. We did some parachutes. That's how this whole thing started. So when you start a podcast, it is mostly trial and error. It is going to be constantly trial and error until you find your ground and then you stick with that. And I think that's the case of Joe Rogan because none of the clips that India Ori showed were recent clips. Once again, he had hair on them. So it's not that he's entitled to ignorance, but we have to be careful sometimes with figures like Trevor Noah and John Oliver. And the reason for this is that they want to look that they are for people and they are for truth. But sometimes they know jack shit about some topics and what they do is like embed their opinion as an absolute truth. And that is something that is really, really concerning to me. Because in John Oliver's case, I remember that he did an episode once on WWE and into the fact that WWE does not give health insurance to the wrestlers. But something that he did not mention on his episode is the fact that wrestler contracts now are handled as talent contracts. So when you are a talent, you're sort of a freelance over there. So you're not directly, even though you're contracted by the company, but you are like an independent contractor for the company, even though they have doctors, but obviously the doctors are going to go to which the company needs. If you're going to die in an hour, but we need 40 minutes of your match, the doctors are going to lean to the company side. And we can understand that. A funny thing about that story is that they could have gone way into more context because Jesse the Body Ventura, former governor of Minnesota and also a wrestler, he tried on the 80s to create an union within the wrestlers. The thing is that some of the wrestlers ratted him out, and that's the reason why they now have these talent contracts, which in part it came as a decline because up until the mid-90s, most of the wrestling stars, they had even access to have a certain amount of insurance by Lloyd's of London. Okay, which wasn't bad. And Jesse Ventura's intentions were not bad either, but Vince McMahon found a way to work around that. And that's the reason why wrestlers do not have health insurance included in their contracts. Let's remember, there's a couple of low tiers wrestlers that they travel around, they have to share and blah blah blah, but they are around the 60. I think there's $120,000-$80,000 a year around that. Because the thing that he omitted were two important facts. One of them is that most of the rosters on the WWE, they are $100,000 a year up. Lower tier talent will be around the $60,000-$80,000 a year. And now, that's not a small amount of money, but compared to an NBA, NFL athlete, that's peanuts, right? But he omitted that fact that they have really healthy salaries in which they can get that insurance themselves. And the nature of what it is, a talent contract versus an employee contract. So I'm not saying that John Oliver's point is completely wrong, but it was not given with the right facts and the right legal facts at hand. So the same thing Trevor Noah does with the whole Joe Rogan going racist thing. So in the case of Trevor, he went to the clips, but we're missing one important fact here. Joe Rogan had hair on those clips. Hair. Something that has been missing from that show, I think, for 6-7 years now or something more. I think more. This is when he was like recording like 7 episodes or something like that, I think, and he ran out of things. Because that's the thing. podcasts are trial and error, and that does not justify that we be shitty human beings and we be shitty to others. I know, I completely understand that, but podcasts are done on that. We have to shed our ignorance out at the beginning when we start on these projects, so that we can become that better version of ourselves that can be able to deliver information in a more organized and in a more educated and more compassive and more compassive manner. Because the problem of the whole Joe Rogan issue is the fact that we are facing all of this, and it is really hard. And over here. So he did not acknowledge the fact of what podcasts are. So I could give it to him. He doesn't know jack shit. He started a stand-up comedian. He gets the royal throne and everything. So that's good. That's good for him. Now, we have to be real careful on this topic. Once again, internet is like the domino effect. You tumble one down, everyone else of them are going to be falling down. And it's something that is going to keep on happening. You take Joe Rogan out of the air of the internet, 10 worse podcasts are going to pop out. And from those 10, 5 of them are going to give him interviews. So it's like the whole Gina Carano mess on The Mandalorian, in which Ben Shapiro, I think she wasn't like full officially fired, and Ben Shapiro was already announcing that he had an exclusive interview with Gina Carano. And the internet can be a mean place, but it could be a good place. And at the end of the day, it's what we make of it. It is not like radio and television. We cannot be jumping into canceling shit. We cannot do that because we're going to bring out something worse. Because the people who identify with the worst things from the thing that you're trying to cancel, they're going to feel attacked. And they're going to attack back. And that's something that we don't want. And I don't think he did something bad by bringing someone with a different opinion on how things have been handled so far. And trial and error, I think it was quite a messy start. But I had also a messy start, and many people who we are embedded into this, who we are not into this because we jump into this because it became popular. There's some people here that we do this because we like this. We do this because we respect this. And we do this not because we are bandwagoneers who are on films, who are there, who are here, who are over whatever the fuck. We have, and this is kind of hard because the podcast environment is supposed to be so different from traditional media. And what worries me as well is that people are turning the whole podcast into having to adhere to these rules of traditional media, when this is an escape from traditional media. This is a place in which you can openly swear. This is a place in which you can use foul words. And this is a place in which a lot of people, they have freedom for their thoughts. Because we have to know something. Even if we do not agree with a person, we have to know that it's a fact that that person has a human right to express his opinion or her opinion. Even if that opinion could be wrong, even if that opinion defies logic at every turn, they have a right to it. And that's a long time ago, that's what I thought the internet, even with their agendas and ambitions and the money that most of these people are making out of us, I thought that that was like a clear, no boundaries area. And we see the attitude of Facebook, for example, in which they have taken this authoritarian attitude in which they banning people, closing people's pages. Right now, I don't know how many pages I have on Facebook. But trying to set a standard, You say words like derogatory terms for gay people, you get banned for 7 days. I can allow that because I have business that are conductors to Facebook. But it sucks. And then you want to suck people into spiritual bullshit. But he's right. And Joe is the epitome of evil. But there's this guy who just wants to grab cash and sell you information to as many companies as he wants. And he's the hero? I think you people are getting the whole internet thing a little bit wrong. I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is a hero, but he's not a villain. And I've seen him grow. That's why I can point out to 10 or 20 episodes, so I don't want to be smashed for that. There are actually master classes on life itself. There's an episode with Maynard James Keenan, which is the vocalist of Tool, and there's another episode which is with the Black Keys, and those two episodes are master classes, fucking master classes on what the music industry is, how the music industry works, and how the music industry is ready to fuck you up if you are a music artist. Same thing on Hollywood, and I think I have not delved so much to find the good Hollywood, good filmmaking podcast within the episodes. I know I will, but there's good episodes as well. I think Andrew Yang was there, and it was a really good episode. Andrew Yang is a really great guest. You can have it in any kind of podcast, even a full right-wing podcast like Ben Shapiro, and it's going to be a marvelous episode of exchanging of ideas. So it worries me a little bit, his political ambitions, but he makes a really great guest. Unlike Elon Musk, who makes a really suck-ass guest, and I will not want to have him on my podcast, because the reason of the whole controversy of Elon Musk doing a joint is that when you listen to that episode, he starts on a really negative way, like trying to put a scientific base on what happened on the Terminator will be what happens to us, or what happened on the Matrix as well, or WALL-E. And that was the beginning. That was like the first 30 minutes of the podcast. And you see Joe, like he's struggling to making go down of this fatal narrative that he has. And what better way to take him down out of a fatal and so fatal and negative narrative than to give the guy a joint? There was no choice there. They had to give him that joint because the guy started really negative. And maybe it is due to his own attention whoring, I don't know. But it was really a horrible, cringe-worthy episode. I even felt so bad for Joe Rogan on that episode that he had to go through that shit. I said that I was going to be more picky when I had guests over here, because I don't want that shit to happen here. Well, it could happen, but I don't know. I want to control the most that I can that it doesn't. But at the end, it's like that. The internet gives us freedom. Maybe you have an opinion that is different to mine. Maybe I have an opinion that is different to yours. But we have sources. We have tools. We have people who spoke to us. We have people who think like us. And trying to put and push forward the whole cancel culture into the internet is just making them higher. The thing that worries me about what has happened to Joe Rogan is that he has been in the last years in a really good way. He did not get $100 million contract for nothing, not merely for the audience, because the quality has been improving over the years. So he's making a really good podcast. Now, the thing is that we have to respect those boundaries. And something that worries me a lot on this is that, as I said earlier, that we get like some Congress, some law passed on what we can say and what we can't say. That will be horrible. But I want to... And something bad in the case of Joe Rogan is that Joe Rogan is not getting canceled. But the thing is that we have thrown him into the far right. Now that's his crowd. He had a really balanced crowd until all of these things started happening. There were leftists, there were people on center and far right people and liberals and progressives. Everybody was listening to him. And now, due to a controversy, he's gonna he's gonna have a surge on the right wing crowd, and he's going to also have a surge on the left-wing crowd because trying to nitpick on shit to see if they can finally make a fucking cancellation over the internet. But in both areas, activism on this shit is really bad. What we need is real answers. What we need is to ask our government to be a little bit more honest and sincere about the health information that we're given in. We want to trust the government in a way because we are not doctors. We're not experts on medicine, on our health. And we want to be able to trust government. But if you tell me the government wants to set out what is the absolute truth without recognizing viable and credible data from around the world, then this is sending quite a wrong message. And as we have seen with former President Donald Trump, these people, and I'm not speaking of Joe Rogan right now. I'm speaking of far right fanatics. They have found their way. They have built the platforms. They are now invisible into a way that if they decided that they want to do a genocide on minorities in the United States, we will not know what hit us because they're so fucking well hidden within the they are so well hidden now because we push them. But that's the thing about the internet. You can push something, but you cannot cancel. You do not delete. That's the thing about the internet. And besides that, it just makes things worse. Because people are going to find channels. People are going to code a website. They're going to code a way to create a blog. We have to understand, and it's not only a problem of far-right politics. It is a problem of everything, because nobody should be claiming to have an absolute truth on their hands. We need to acknowledge some of the reports that are coming around the world. We need to acknowledge some of the information that may not be in tune with the main information. But that is information that is important to get out of this. And it is information that is important to build a better society around it. And in the case of CNN, we cannot have media with a whip on their hand telling people, you have to do this. Because people are going to rise up. This is the era of knowledge, supposed to be. Those are my 2 cents on that. Podcasts should not be canceled, should not be asked to be canceled. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. You try to cancel something on the internet, you're going to make it bigger. Canceling in the internet is throwing gasoline to a fire. That's the main topic here. That's what you people need to understand. Now that that's said, we are back with the Macedon cast, and it will stay in English, as you have heard. So we got a couple of interesting episodes. We got wrestling. We got a lot of things that we're going to be covering. So please stay tuned and always subscribe. It is always better to use the Spreaker application or iHeartRadio, in which they are the 2 platforms in which this podcast comes out first. But you can also listen to it on Spotify, Pandora, Deezer, Usavin if you're around the India area. And always a shout out to my beautiful people over in Birmingham, England, and all of my beautiful people in London. I've been getting a lot of your love and a lot of your support to the Base of Macedon podcast, and I'm really happy for the support that you have given me. And you don't know, guys, you have given me so much. You have given me hope. You have given me life through a dark time. So I'm really in depth with the people in England, specifically with the people in Birmingham and in London. for that massive support, and I'm really so thankful for it. And there's also new episodes on the base of Mastodon that they have been going out since February 17th, so please tune into that once. We will have topics on music too, so that we can talk a little bit more on the crazy history of the base of Mastodon, which is one of the new podcasts over here at Mastodon Media, and it has been a runaway success, and I'm really happy for that. So stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff. My El Mastodon podcast. If you want to see me ranting and swearing in Spanish, that's your option over there. And just wanted to let you know that I'm gonna give you soon a date within this month in which the House of Scotch, now a new podcast, will begin. And it will be an interesting concept. We're still working on it. We're still on the drawing board, but it will be a little bit more. It will be. We're thinking about. It's not official. Putting a live format, or at least try to record it as live as we can. And unlike what you heard before, that it was mostly house project, it will have a little bit of an urban flair. So. Once again, this is Marcel Mastodon Cruz for Mastodon Cast. Stay tuned and take care.